Every life is built twice, first in the mind and then in reality. Before any achievement, before any failure, there is a thought that gives it shape. The mind is the architect of everything that follows. If your thoughts are grounded in fear, you will build walls, invisible yet unbreakable barriers that keep you confined within your own limitations. But if your thoughts are rooted in courage, you will build wings, the kind that carry you beyond what you once believed possible. You become the designer of your own existence, whether you realize it or not. Every thought is a brick, and the structure it forms is either your prison or your liberation. What traps most people is not the world around them, but the story inside their heads. The moment you tell yourself, "I can't," your mind begins constructing a reality that proves you right. Doubt multiplies, opportunities vanish, and soon you begin to mistake your own limitations for the limits of life itself. That's the tragedy of thought. It becomes self-fulfilling. You live inside a cage you unknowingly built with words and beliefs. The truth is, the mind obeys what you repeat. If you constantly feed it fear, it learns to protect you through avoidance. If you feed it vision, it learns to empower you through action. Whatever you consistently think, you eventually become. Building wings isn't a matter of blind optimism, it's an act of discipline. The mind, left unattended, doesn't naturally create freedom. It creates comfort, and comfort often becomes confinement. To think clearly, you must first take responsibility for what you allow to live in your head. It requires training the same way a body must be trained to grow stronger. Every time you challenge a negative thought, you strengthen your mental resilience. Every time you replace fear with focus, you expand the horizon of what's possible. The walls of limitation don't fall by accident. They crumble under the steady pressure of intentional thought. Freedom of mind is a practice, not a gift. Inside every human being exists a constant battle between the voice of fear and the voice of vision. Fear says, "Stay where it's safe," while vision whispers, "Go where you belong." Fear builds walls by exaggerating risk. Vision builds wings by expanding perspective. The question is not whether you have fear, everyone does, but which voice you choose to listen to. The mind will always serve the master you feed. If you feed it fear, it will guard you from growth. If you feed it vision, it will push you toward transformation. You are both the prisoner and the liberator, the captor and the savior. The battlefield is your own consciousness. In the end, the greatest realization is this: you are not a victim of your mind, you are its creator. The power to think differently is the power to live differently. Every belief you challenge, every doubt you dismantle, is a stone removed from the wall. And every courageous thought, every vision you commit to, is a feather added to your wings. The mind was never meant to confine you, it was meant to carry you. But to make it your ally, you must consciously shape it with truth, purpose, and discipline. Because in this life, the difference between flying and falling isn't fate, it's focus. And when your thoughts finally align with your potential, you don't just escape the cage, you rise above it. Most people believe they live freely, but very few actually do. The strongest prisons are never made of concrete or steel, they are made of thoughts. Beliefs, once accepted without question, become invisible chains that bind your potential. They whisper, "This is who you are," and you obey, never realizing that you've mistaken habit for truth. A belief can limit your choices long before life ever does. You stop trying because you assume you can't. You stop dreaming because someone told you it's unrealistic. And slowly, without resistance, the cage closes around you, not by force, but by agreement. That's how powerful beliefs are. They don't have to be true to control you. They only have to be believed. No one is born chained. Every limiting belief begins as a borrowed idea, inherited from parents, teachers, friends, or a society that tells you what is possible. As children, we absorb these words as truth because we haven't yet learned to question them. You're not good enough. People like you can't succeed. Be realistic. These phrases echo in the subconscious for years, shaping every decision we make. The tragedy is that we grow up living someone else's definition of what is possible. The mind, once conditioned, doesn't need external walls. It polices itself. You stop attempting the extraordinary not because it's impossible, but because you've been trained to believe it is. Freedom begins the moment you dare to question your beliefs. When you ask, is this actually true, or have I just believed it for too long, you shake the foundation of your mental cage. Most people never challenge their assumptions, because doing so feels like tearing away a piece of identity. But truth doesn't fear inquiry. Only illusion does. When you start examining the roots of your fears, your doubts, and your insecurities, you often find that they're not grounded in reality, but in repetition. You've simply believed them into existence. The act of questioning transforms the unseen into the visible. And once you can see your chains, you can begin to break them. Breaking old beliefs is not enough. You must replace them with stronger, truer ones. Nature hates a vacuum. If you destroy a limiting belief but don't build a liberating one, the old patterns will return. You must rebuild consciously. Believe in effort over excuses, in growth over comfort, in purpose over fear. Create beliefs that empower you to act, to endure, to rise. This requires responsibility, because once you recognize that your mind was the jailer, you can no longer blame the world for your captivity. Freedom demands ownership. It's no longer about what others told you, it's about what you now choose to tell yourself. In the end, the most powerful realization is that beliefs are choices, not laws. The moment you change them, your entire world rearranges itself around your new understanding. What once looked like a wall becomes a door. What once felt impossible becomes a challenge. You begin to live, not react. The mind, once freed from falsehood, becomes the greatest ally you will ever have. You stop asking for permission to grow, you simply grow. Because the chains were never real, they were only thoughts unchallenged. The day you decide to see beyond them, you don't just break free, you become limitless. Life, by default, is chaos. Everything around you is in motion, uncertain, unpredictable, and constantly changing. Without structure, the mind becomes overwhelmed by this vast uncertainty. That's why so many people drift through life, not because they lack potential, but because they lack discipline. Discipline is the bridge between chaos and order. It gives shape to the formless, direction to confusion, and meaning to time. Without it, you become scattered, pulled by impulses, lost in distraction, enslaved by comfort. The human spirit needs structure as much as the body needs air. The difference between a wasted life and a purposeful one often comes down to a single trait: the ability to discipline yourself when no one else will. Many people believe freedom means doing whatever you want, following every feeling, chasing every whim. But that's not freedom. That's chaos disguised as liberty. When you obey every impulse, you become a slave to them. True freedom is the ability to control yourself, to act with intention rather than reaction. Self-discipline is not the enemy of freedom, it's the foundation of it. It allows you to choose your path consciously instead of being tossed by emotion or circumstance. A person without discipline might feel free, but they are ruled by their moods. A disciplined person might seem constrained, but they are guided by purpose. The paradox is clear. Only those who can command themselves can truly live freely. Discipline doesn't begin in grand acts. It begins in the small, invisible decisions you make every day. Waking up when you said you would, finishing what you started, saying no to what weakens you. Every act of discipline is a quiet declaration that you are in charge of your life. The small habits you build become the architecture of your character. They create internal order, a framework that can withstand external chaos. The person who cannot govern their days cannot hope to govern their destiny. Chaos will always exist in the world, but discipline ensures it never takes root in you. Routine, focus, and consistency don't limit your potential. They release it by removing the noise that clouds your mind. Discipline is not easy because it demands confrontation with the weakest parts of yourself: laziness, fear, procrastination, and desire for comfort. Every day, there is a silent war between who you are and who you could be. Discipline is the weapon that ensures the right side wins. It means doing what must be done even when you don't feel like it. Feelings are temporary, responsibility is not. When you learn to act independent of mood, you begin to live with integrity. Discipline is not about perfection, it's about direction. Each disciplined act moves you one step closer to mastery, while each act of indulgence strengthens the grip of chaos. The battlefield is the self, and victory belongs to those who persist despite resistance. When you master self-discipline, you no longer fear chaos, you learn to shape it. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, even meaningful. The same life that once drowned you in confusion now becomes a canvas for creation. Order emerges not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. The disciplined mind brings clarity where there was noise, progress where there was paralysis, and peace where there was struggle. You realize that self-discipline was never about restriction. It was about liberation, the freedom to live a life directed by purpose rather than chaos. And in that realization, you discover one of life's deepest truths. The disciplined soul doesn't wait for the world to make sense. It creates sense within the world. Most people move through life half awake. They react, they repeat, they survive, but they rarely see. They mistake motion for direction and habit for intention. They don't realize that much of what they call choice is simply unconscious repetition of old patterns, fears, desires, and beliefs installed long ago. Without awareness, you live as a passenger in your own life, driven by impulses and emotions you barely understand. You become predictable to your pain and loyal to your suffering. That's the tragedy of unawareness. It doesn't just limit your freedom, it makes you believe you are already free. To awaken is to realize how deeply asleep you were, to finally see the invisible strings that pull your every move. Awareness is not a technique, it is an act of honesty. It is the courage to look at yourself without distortion or defense. It's standing before your own mind and saying, "Show me what is real, not what is comfortable." Awareness is the mirror that reveals the hidden motives behind your actions, why you chase approval, why you fear failure, why you sabotage peace the moment you find it. This kind of seeing is uncomfortable, even painful, because truth always exposes illusion, but only what is seen can be healed. You cannot change what you refuse to face. Awareness doesn't always bring peace at first. Often, it brings clarity, and clarity, though sharp, is the beginning of liberation. The moment you become aware, something incredible happens. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You can watch them arise, observe their nature, and decide whether to act on them or not. That's where freedom begins. Without awareness, you obey every emotion, anger, jealousy, fear as if it were truth. But awareness separates the observer from the storm. It gives you the space to respond instead of react. The difference may seem small, but it changes everything. That single pause between thought and action is the birthplace of wisdom. Awareness transforms the mind from a master into a tool, and when you can see your thoughts without being controlled by them, the prison begins to dissolve. Awareness is the quiet revolution of soul. It doesn't shout, it observes. It doesn't demand, it understands. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You stop blaming the world for your pain and start recognizing your participation in it. Awareness teaches responsibility, the recognition that while you cannot control every event, you can always control how you interpret it. That understanding turns chaos into clarity, pain into teaching, and failure into growth. You begin to see that nothing outside of you has power unless you grant it. Awareness doesn't remove difficulty from life. It removes ignorance from the self, and that changes everything. Freedom is not found in escaping life, it's found in fully seeing it. When awareness deepens, you stop running from pain, you stop clinging to pleasure, and you begin to experience both with understanding. You realize that the goal was never to control life, but to know yourself within it. Awareness turns life from a battlefield into a classroom. You learn to live deliberately, love consciously, and suffer purposefully. In that awareness, the illusions that bound you, fear, doubt, resentment, lose their power. You become calm, centered, unshaken. That is true liberation, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of self-understanding. Awareness is the light that reveals that the door to freedom was never locked. You just had to open your eyes to see it. Every life begins and ends in the mind. Before any victory in the outer world, there must be a victory within. Most people lose that battle before it even begins, not because the world defeats them, but because their mind convinces them they are already defeated. The mind can be your greatest ally or your most cunning enemy. It has the power to create realities or destroy them. Every fear, every hesitation, every self-doubt begins as a whisper inside your head. And if you don't learn to master that voice, it will run your life. You cannot command your destiny if you cannot command your thoughts. The first war you must win is the silent one within yourself. People try to control everything, their relationships, their future, their image, but fail to control the one thing that governs all their mind. You can have the best opportunities, resources, or talent, but if your mind is undisciplined, none of it will matter. Without mental mastery, success becomes accidental and fragile. You will sabotage your own progress every time doubt, anger, or fear takes control. Mastering the mind means creating internal order before seeking external control. It means understanding that peace and power do not come from changing the world. They come from mastering how you see the world. The moment you stop trying to control everything outside of you and start mastering everything inside you, life begins to align. To master the mind is not a single moment of enlightenment, it is a daily discipline. It's learning to recognize the patterns of your thoughts, the triggers of your emotions, and the illusions of your fears. The mind is a wild force, powerful but untamed and without conscious training. It will drift toward negativity and comfort. Mastery comes from awareness, repetition, and responsibility. You must constantly guard your focus, feed your intellect with truth, and discipline your attention like a muscle. Meditation, reflection, and solitude are not escapes. They are tools of self-command. Every time you choose focus over distraction, purpose over impulse, and action over avoidance, you reinforce the structure of mastery. Slowly the chaos fades and a powerful calm takes its place. When you master your mind, you stop being a victim of emotion and circumstance. You no longer depend on the approval of others, because your peace comes from within. You begin to act from clarity instead of reaction. You become less moved by fear and more guided by purpose. The external world will still test you, it always will, but it can no longer control you. That's the essence of power, to remain calm when others panic, to think when others react, and to see truth when others are blinded by emotion. Inner mastery gives you authority over yourself, and that authority radiates into everything you touch. People sense it, the steadiness, the presence, the depth, because it's rare in a world ruled by chaos. Mastering the mind is not about dominance, it's about harmony. It's about becoming whole, aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions with a higher sense of truth. When your mind serves your purpose instead of resisting it, life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like creation. You stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. The storms still come, but they no longer define you. You navigate them with direction and wisdom. That is the highest form of freedom, not escaping the mind, but mastering it, because once you govern your thoughts, you govern your destiny. The one who conquers the mind doesn't just survive life. They shape it,